It's Inappropriate Characters.
Hello and welcome to
Pundit, you're up.
Hello and welcome to Inappropriate Characters. This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords. And I'm here tonight with, as usual, Grim Jim and Venger. And we've got quite a lot to talk about because it's been about a month since the last time we did an episode. There were scheduling things that made it impossible to do it any earlier. But if you want to force us to do episodes more often, then go to our Patreon page and support us on Patreon. If we get some more of those Patreon dollars, we will feel obliged to do 2 or 3 or 4 or more episodes a month, depending on how many levels of funding we get. So remember that. Get into the Patreon page and support us.
Yes, if you want to see me die of exhaustion from staying up.
well, maybe we'll have to schedule it a different hour. Maybe sometime we're gonna have to force Venger to be the one to get up at 1:30 in the morning for this.
Yes, I'm sure the wife will love that.
All right. Well, tonight we've got quite a lot to talk about, but the first thing you should all know is that today this episode is the Venger birthday spectacular episode because we are filming on his birthday, and it's very appropriate in a way that it is because he's the first topic of discussion. Venger, you had made a blog entry where you made a fairly controversial statement about your identity, which in turn was used as kind of the excuse or the reason, depending on how you look at it, to create a whole fairly immense shit show of a conflict within the OSR because certain people took offense to your blog post and then they decided to try to take away the copyright to a popular OSR logo. And in turn, there were some of us who had to, call out these guys because they were claiming that your post was proof that the OSR is full of hateful people and hateful products. So what do you want to tell us about your post? And get ready because I'm ready to question you on it if necessary. So tread carefully, man.
Okay. As you mentioned, leading up to this, there was the whole James Raggy and Jordan Peterson photo opportunity where he was taking pictures with Jordan Peterson
at an event. I did a whole video about that on the YouTube before all of this happened. You're right.
And that kind of, stirred up a lot of things. A lot of social justice warriors and even people that wouldn't normally be social justice warriors, or, you don't think of them as that, or they don't take it that far in their normal role-playing game circles or discussions. Like Jeff Reentz comes to mind. He had this whole half-baked hot take on Jordan Peterson, and while he wasn't exactly the poster boy for neo-Nazism, he might as well have been. That kind of BS and it brought a lot of things to the fore. And then, of course, it was also Trans Awareness Week. And so going back a long time, I've, as I explained in the blog post, I've always felt different. I've always been an outsider, and related to like Lovecraft and the things that Lovecraft was writing way more than I related to the average people on the streets or society, government, church, most parts of culture, music, things like that. So I've always felt different. I always felt in one way or another, not exactly human. And wasn't until, and I, expressed myself through creative writing, everything from short stories and poetry to, role-playing games and adventures. And I just got to the point where I wanted to come out as, I don't know, a transhumanist, maybe. That I saw myself as this green-skinned, tentacled alien humanoid that I named Zakir, more than I identified with being like a normal human. And that's something I wanted to put out there. I just thought it was ready, and it was time for me to do that. And things had kind of opened to the point where I expected to get a whole lot more acceptance, maybe, or at least understanding, or at least people waiting a second before they just came in with torches and pitchforks and their own prejudices and their own, I don't know, fear, hatred of the other, of someone being different. And I was wrong, sure, there were some people that welcomed me and were very cool and kind and understanding, but there were a lot more people that were just, either they went bananas or they were just fucking jerks about it.
Hang on. I think it's safe to say of people believed that what you wrote was a troll post, that you weren't being serious, that it was meant as a kind of a parody. And some of them felt that not only was it meant as a kind of a parody, but that it was also intentionally mocking transgendered people, for example. So what do you have to say about that?
That's just not true. I understand where people would think that, I guess, because a lot of people have opinions on me that don't know me, that have just heard one or two things, or they know me by association, because these people over here that they're friends with have a bone to pick with me. And so that just spreads, and there's rumors and exaggerations. And people think that I'm a dick for whatever reason from years back when I got booted from RPGNOW back in, I don't know, 2005. People still carry that grudge or that animosity. So on the one hand, I can see where people might think that, but so then when I try to explain myself, then a lot of people didn't want to hear that, and some people did, and I changed their minds, and they understood.
So for the record, you are not anti-trans. You do not reject the idea that a person can be transsexual. You don't believe that transgender people are faking it or something like that, right?
No, I do not believe that they're faking it. I do believe that gender and race and a lot of other things are not only biological, but also psychological and sociological. That it's an identity that people can take or leave, just like it's, on the other hand, just realistically, what kind of plumbing do you have? And so if I, just with the pronoun things, I'm totally in support of Jordan Peterson, and I don't think any of that forced speech or compelled speech, pronouns, things like that, should be mandatory or in law. But at the same time, if someone decides that they want to be a female or male or something else, or black, white, or an alien race, who am I to judge them? I'm not going to stand in the way. I'm going to treat them as they would want to be treated. And I have. Okay. I mean, I don't think anyone can find an instance online or in real life where I was,
where you posted something and
like presenting themselves as female or male or something. And I was just like, I don't know, like, no, you're pretending or something. Yeah, that's never happened. I've never done that. I've been a radical subjectivist for as long as I can remember. Your belief is your reality. That was the tenets in the Cult of Cthulhu back when I was leading that, and it's still part of my philosophy. That
So
whatever's in your own mind, and that's what's real for you, and
right.
your reality is for you. And just because you believe a thing, that doesn't necessarily mean jack to me. You can believe the Earth is flat. I can believe that the Earth is shaped like a 20-sided die.
So Venger,
that's my belief, and no one is going to change my mind if that's what I decide to believe.
Okay, so this is my situation via your blog post, right? Which is that on the one hand, it's really easy to see how people could look at that and say this is a shit post, right? This is Venger trolling, and he's specifically mocking certain things. Maybe it's a bigger stretch to say that this means Venger is anti-trans, right? It could just mean Venger is against certain politically correct elements about identity or something like that.
Which I am. I am against.
But on the other hand, the only thing that gives me some doubt about this being a shit post is because I'm, a scholar of religion and a scholar of occultism and that sort of thing, and I know the background of your kind of magical activities. You really do believe that, which I don't, by the way, that you create your own reality. I think that's New Age bullshit, but you believe it. Your style of magic believes that. My style of occultism doesn't.
Right.
And what's more, your style of occultism, if you look at all of the Cthulhu is real schools of occultism, going all the way back to the Typhonian OTO and Kenneth Grant and these guys, you read these books, Shadow Outside of Time and all this stuff, and it's a movement who believes that magic is something they'll be able to use to escape their humanity, right, and to become something other than human. So that is absolutely an element of the stuff I know you're actually into,
right.
Which to me is the opposite of what my personal teacher. His motto was "Be more human," right? And my own occult studies are about becoming fully human, not perfect. That's a different thing, but becoming fully human, right? But I can totally believe that, given what I know about the occultism you practice, that you would really want to stop being human and to be this other thing, or to identify as this other thing from the beginning. Maybe not having worked it out in your head, but now saying, well, yeah, I'm not human. I don't want to be human. And I want to feel like I'm a green tentacled alien, right? That does sound, you have to accept that would sound to the average person completely batshit crazy, right? And to people who are, who instead of that feel like, well, I feel like a woman, but trapped in a man's body. When you say, well, I feel like a green tentacle thing trapped in a man's body, it can sound like mockery, right? So I guess my question is, what did your wife think about all of this when you told her?
Well, she's known me for about 8 years, I think, 7, 8 years, and yeah, she knew from early on about Cthulhu and Lovecraft and various magical practices and beliefs that I had. So it didn't come as a complete shock to her, but as probably a lot of people that are kind of in that position, not to my extent or my degree, but other people that have maybe a shadow self or part of themselves that's not fully open, little bits here and there, trickle out. Like the movie The Birdcage, when Nathan Lane has those colorful, whimsical socks that he wears along with his, I think, 3-piece suit. You have little things like here, like I would say little things or I would have pictures taken with tentacles, or I would, which you can scour the internet, just Google Venger Satanis, you'll see them. You see the tentacles.
There's a lot of Venger Satanis tentacle pictures, and that sounds really bad, but yeah.
Or they're all PG-13 rated at least. Or things like I'd be having discussions online. I'm sure you could find these. You could Google them somewhere where I'm responding to someone, and maybe in like brackets, I'm like, my slimy tentacles, like giving you a high five, or things like that. And so even with my home life, I'll like, some of it is masked with humor and things like that. But they're little bits that show through. So, my wife knows who I am, and somehow accepts me for who I am. And so, yeah, she's I guess she's cool with it. I don't know.
That's fair enough.
It sounds like Morrison-esque chaos magic and fiction suits to me. What fascinates me about this, though, is how on earth did you get the idea that people would be accepting? That's what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around, because like Rachel Dolezal transracial stuff, that's a step too far for these people because they feel that it makes a mockery of transgenderism. And Otherkin and so on have been a whipping boy for the internet as long as I've been aware of them. So how did you get the idea that people might accept this? That's what fascinates me.
Well, I knew a lot of people wouldn't get it, and I was fine with that because it's my choice, my decision, and I'm going to be who I'm going to be, and I don't, care what the consensus is or backlash or community standards or whatever. But on the other hand, I also feel like I'm acknowledged as an artist, not to the extent of like someone like David Bowie or Marilyn Manson or someone like that, where they have these theatrical personas, but I'm still an artist and to some degree a performer and entertainer. That's kind of how I view not only the game mastering, but my writing, the role-playing game writing. And I know it's going to take time. I mean, I knew that, a lot of people would reject that. I didn't know quite the level of shitstorm that, it would generate. I had a vague notion that some people are going to be like, oh, this fucking guy is at it again. So
on the topic of that shitstorm, I guess what you wouldn't have expected was that there's this guy named Stuart Robertson who has now, you'll be glad to know, left the OSR forever, he's declared. But anyways, at the time, before your blog post, he was already making very public, hand-wringing statements about the fact that Jordan Peterson had a photo with Jim Raggi meant that the OSR was under the control of the alt-right, and that there was all these hateful products and harassing products that were coming out under the banner of the OSR. And then when you posted your blog, he declared, because of this, that this was the last straw. He was removing the rights to this OSR logo that he came up with, and here comes my cat. So he removed the rights to this OSR logo that he came up with, and that he had put under the Creative Commons 3.0 license, I believe, or 2.0, I don't remember which one. And that from now on, people who produced hateful products had no right to use his logo. Right now, not everyone used his logo. It was probably one of the more popular OSR logos, no question about it. And the thing was, it was released under Creative Commons, but he was claiming that because of hate speech in the criminal code of Canadian law, him being Canadian, that he was allowed to do this. And what came of it was that there was this big backlash against him, not just from the right, but also from some people on the left who were questioning, because he was essentially trying to claim copyright over, the OSR, because he wasn't just saying the logo. He was implying that if you made another logo that had the letters OSR in it, then he could still do the same thing against you, right? And when he was challenged by me especially, but other people too, to name just one OSR product that he would define as a hateful product, or more importantly, one that would fall under his definition, which was the Canadian Criminal Code definition of hate speech, he couldn't name a single one. And then he got angry and he said, well, now you can't use the OSR logo anymore, right? Which just was the mask coming off, that this guy was a leftist hack that was using this as an excuse to engage in SJWism, right? He proved himself that. But it caused a huge stir. It caused division in the OSR. It caused a lot of people to make a lot of new logos, including, a friend of mine, Geeky Bugle, who's a Mexican artist who I did a video about that on my YouTube channel. And in the end, it may have been part of the reason for the OSR G+ group being shut down. That group was owned by Joseph Bloch. Now, he moved to MeWe and he said, well, we're just going to shut it down here on G+ because we don't want to keep using it here. Everybody move to MeWe. And so he's got a MeWe OSR group. But that may have accelerated, let's say, the demise of the OSR group on Google+, which had been a very influential group in terms of the development of the OSR at the time. And other stuff too, right? Like Grim might be able to point out, you had some people who made a false trademark claim against D&D Gate and have been trying to get YouTube to strike out certain videos of mine, of Grim Jim's. I don't know if any of yours, Venger, maybe, of other people. I
think some of Venger's were listed.
Yeah, of all kinds of people using the claim that the D&D Gate is trademarked, right? And of course, fortunately, YouTube didn't pay attention to them. But this is the sort of tactics they get down to. Stuart Robertson was saying that he'll do copyright strikes to anyone who uses the term OSR, right? And that they should pressure One Bookshelf to try to ban anyone who, even if their products are G-rated, but who they themselves as writers express hate in other places, right? And stuff like that. So it created quite a clusterfuck. I don't think, though, that was, like I said, I don't think that was specifically because of your blog, Venger, because Robertson looked like he was very ready to do this anyways. He was looking for the right excuse, right? And you could tell when the Peterson photo came out that he was already, wringing his hands in fake concern and being prepared to strike against the OSR.
I think Venger just kind of poured petrol on the fire and accelerated everything.
Yeah.
It's unlike Stuart Robinson, though. We used to talk a lot, less lately. He was always fairly free speechy in the past, so I don't know what's changed particularly. Well,
this is an interesting point, which is that I think that the last couple of years and the rise of the kind of extreme SJW ideology, combined with the fact that Donald Trump is president, has caused a very interesting shift for some people in the OSR. Because, of course, the OSR does have people who are kind of SJW entryists that have come later and tried to bring social justice warrior politics into the OSR. But it also has a number of people, and I've seen this in a number of people that have made OSR products, that as a result of the events of the last 2 years, let's call it, right, have moved either in one direction or another, as they've seen the increasing demand for purity tests and litmus tests and censorships from the social justice crowd. What you had was a lot of people, not people who were already, conservatives or libertarians, but mainly people who were very distressed about Donald Trump winning the election, right? These kind of moderate Democrats who are really hoping for Hillary to win, right? People like Venger, who, faced with this increasing totalitarianism in the hobby, decided to move either in one direction or the other. I mean, I have watched, and I'm sure, Grim, that you've seen this too, Venger gradually evolving from a Hillary bot into a decent human being who is standing up for...
that's a hate crime. He's not human now, remember?
That's right. Don't commit a hate crime on our show and get us taken down.
Don't miss-species him.
This is the thing, right? Is that Venger was always free speech, right? And he was also a Democrat, and he was also somebody who supported Hillary. And there were a lot of people in the OSR who were like him, who were Democrats, who believed in free speech, and who supported Hillary. And then when Hillary lost, and when the SJWs came demanding an end to free speech, all of those people had a choice to make. And some of them, like Venger, said, well, it's really hard to call myself a Democrat anymore, and I definitely don't like these SJW assholes, and stood up against them. And the other half went the other way. I want to point out to you, because it's now been brought up here, that the second moderator of the OSR Google Plus group is a guy named Vincent Florio. And he, by all accounts, apparently was he's a longtime OSR guy, and he was a free speech kind of guy. But it was very clear to me during this whole incident of the OSR logo thing that he was allowing Stewart to keep posting stuff that called me a Nazi, right? Stuff that called Venger a transphobe. But when I posted responses to that or posted links to video, he would immediately remove them. And then I noticed that some of the stuff that wasn't even about any of that was being removed. Links to, my blog entry on medieval colleges, right, was being removed. And I asked Joseph Bloch about it. He said it's probably a mistake, right? Well, since that time, there's been a group that opened on Google Plus that calls itself the Honorable OSR, which consists of social justice warriors that the group was supposed to be a way to virtue signal that you are not represented by the evil OSR people who are the deplorable alt-right people. And it's got like 150 members or something. It has less members than my Dungeon Crawl Classics MeWe group, so it's not a big success. But as usual, there's people that tell me stuff, and there's somebody in there who has been feeding me information. And apparently Vincent Florio is on there, and he's virtue bragging about the fact that he, blocked my stuff on the Google Plus OSR group, right? He's saying how deeply concerned he was and blah, 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 and he was blocking it. And this is a group where you have people saying stuff like, oh, there's this evil alt-right axis of Venger, Pundit, Joseph Bloch, and Eric Tenkar, right? So it's naming his boss in the old OSR group and his boss in the MeWe OSR group now. And I think that Joseph just really has no idea about this, but this guy has basically changed from the person he knew into a person who is taking a side in favor of censorship, right? And desperately trying to earn the love of the SJWs, right? And we've seen this phenomenon with a lot of people.
I looked for that. You said that group is on MeWe, the Honorable OSR?
No, the Honorable OSR is on Google Plus.
Oh, okay, that's why.
Yeah. And you're probably
Tenkar is so neutral. It's almost pathological. So seeing him as
Joseph Bloch is too. Whatever his personal politics is, Joseph Bloch, the guy that owned the Google Plus OSR group and now owns the MeWe OSR group, has tried to be strongly neutral when it comes to his group, right? He doesn't want it to turn into a political shitfest, and of course that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But these guys in this group are including him with people like me and Venger, because to them neutrality means you're an alt-right Nazi, right? If you're not completely on board with their agenda, then you are clearly the enemy, and neutrality just means that you must, be everything they hate. So being neutral isn't acceptable.
Yeah. All I can imagine now is Zach Brannigan saying, "What causes a man to turn neutral?" From Futurama.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. It's just it's you don't even have you don't even have to be opposed to them in any particular way. You just have to be not exactly like them in this little area that they've chosen. I mean, Peterson I've got my issues with him. I think he's a bit of a huckster, a bit of a snake oil salesman. But if Raji gets something out of his self-help stuff, who cares? And he's, center left, center right, somewhere around there, fairly conventional, sort of centrist liberal for the most part, to the right that hitched themselves to his wagon after he was monstered in that way. If you look at the OSR, as far as the alt-right goes, the only person I can think of is Varg, who put out one game.
He never made an OSR book. He tried to make overtures to the OSR, but his book isn't even an OSR book. And everybody hates it. I mean, everybody. Nobody stands for the guy.
Yeah, so I don't know where that's coming from. This Trademark thing, that's the guy behind Grim and Perilous, which is a rip-off of First Ed Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, really. It's just a retro clone, so I don't know why he's got such a enormously inflated ego. And D&D Gate, the tag.
It's an increasingly nervous retro clone with the rise of Warhammer 4th Edition.
Yeah, but I mean, sorry, the D&D Gate tag was around before he went to trademark it, so it's got absolutely no legal standing, as YouTube seems to keep ruling. He just keeps. I don't know if you've been spammed by him, but I've had, I think, 2 or 3 attempts by him to make trademark claims on videos that used it. The irony for me is that my video was critical of the idea, and he's still trying to take it down. The irony for me is that
because you're the enemy, obviously.
Well, one of the complaints, one of my criticisms was that Comicsgate was really kicked off by the whole Ice Cream Girls thing. I think that was the final thing that kicked it into gear. Gamergate was triggered by Zoe Quinn's shenanigans, and that there hadn't been a triggering event in the role-playing industry. But I think trademark trolling a hashtag.
It's the triggering event. There we go.
Yeah, that's a kind of a triggering event, and as are these other things. I'm sick of these bun fights by this point, to be honest. And it's weird that I am on a podcast, videocast with you guys, because I am way over to the left. These should be people that I'm allied with, but I'm not, because I have principles about free speech and about logic, reason, evidence. The sanctity of these things, and I'm unwilling to compromise on them. And that seems to be the sticking point. I'm willing to see people publish things that I personally don't like or would even hate, but I just don't buy it. And I'm not willing to compromise on things like the presumption of innocence or the burden of proof being on the person making the claim, whereas they all seem to be all caught up in this Me Too hysteria where just a mere claim made against someone is enough to end their career. And honestly, scarily, I think they would bang people up.
Yeah, they're not the left that venerated people like Martin Luther King or Voltaire. They're not the people that said, I may hate what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. This is the left of Mao Zedong and Pol Pot, right? This is the left that believed in the gulags and the killing fields.
If there is a comparison to be made, I really do think it's with the Red Guard from Mao's China.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what they're most like.
Cultural revolution. They want to tear everything down.
Yeah, I mean, not as severe. I don't want to suggest that they're quite that bad.
You shame yourself in front of the mob and apologize for your thought crimes, and then they'll throw you in prison anyway if you do that, right? And seek to destroy everything that came before to create some demented idea of a new utopia.
All right, but most of this is, if we're honest, it's pretty petty stuff. It's news groups and email lists, Twitter and Facebook and stuff. But it has started to have a bigger impact, and I think a good example of that is what's happened with White Wolf. If we want to move on to talking about that,
let's move there.
Well, I think fuck Russia and fuck Chechnya, and good for you, White Wolf.
Hang on. Can we get a very brief description of exactly what happened in case people don't know?
No.
Shall I cover that or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Right. So the new edition of Vampire is out. The first two books they put out kind of reflect the direction that they're going. I think there was one that was a guide to the Camarilla and one which was a guide to the Anarchs. I think that's where they've moved it, as opposed to Camarilla versus Sabbat. And both of these books contain things that triggered quite a lot of people. In one, there's some characters and ideas and stuff that could be taken as making fun of social justice warriors. Not too severe. That's not where most of the fuss has been. But in the Camarilla book, they described what was going on in Chechnya. And if you're not aware, the president there is rampagingly anti-gay, anti-LGBT, and appears to have literal concentration camps for gay people. Now, Vampire has a long history of taking long history and putting a vampire, alternate dark world spin on things, but using real events, real people, and so on. And they did a write-up of that, talking about it, apparently not particularly sensitively. They've got records, both ways. The Gypsies book was awful, but they handled the Holocaust very well and were lauded for it. But they covered this and implied that it was something of a Camarilla plot, or that the Camarilla was exploiting the situation somehow to get blood or whatever. And this has resulted in so that the book is being withdrawn, redone, reprinted, and White Wolf is a separate entity from the entire company will no longer really exist. It's being drawn back under the company that owns it. I think is it Paradox Interactive?
I believe so. Yeah.
Is that them? I get them mixed up with the Polish company. So yeah, a fuss over what wouldn't have caused much of a stir 10, 15 years ago has essentially erased.
Even 5 years ago.
Well, yeah, even 5 years ago, has essentially erased one of the most recognizable company names in the RPG industry.
Well, what I want to know is what are the chances that White Wolf did that intentionally? That they knew that it would draw a lot of controversy and eyes to them? Or were they just like, well, this is kind of what we've done before, except we're being a little more edgy, which is understandable because it's 2018, 2019. And they just were completely unaware, kind of as I was, that there was this whole outrage backlash brewing in the back room. You just open the door a crack, and then this backdraft comes through, and just all of a sudden the whole place is an inferno. You're like, what the fuck happened?
You'd have thought they'd have seen this coming, though, because they've been being the whipping boy for these people for quite a while. When the new edition was announced and some of the people involved were talking on videos, doing interviews and magazines and things, people going, uh-oh, he's a bit of an edgy boy about one of the people there. And then when the playtest packets went out, there was that absurd 1488 fuss that went up. And that's probably us demonetized for me saying that.
You're talking about personal reasons, personal motives here. This is the thing that, of course, a vast majority of the SJWs are doing what they're doing for some kind of personal motive, right? And for most of them, it's not just virtue signaling. It's the idea that they're going to somehow benefit, especially the ones that are kind of leading the charge, right? They want to be in control, and they also want to make money. And in this case, they want revenge, because White Wolf, after the glory days, when it started to fail in competition with D&D 3rd edition, it went on to be the Onyx Path, right? And the Onyx Path company, right, that ran it, was full of the kind of heavily left-leaning progressives that were going to RPGNet, and that were still the only people that were still going to RPGNet in terms of designers, really, and that were very, a very woke crowd, and they literally ran Vampire into the ground, right? Like it was under their watch that the game went from a struggling, formerly first-tier game into like non-existence, right? It was just gone. And so, of course, when Paradox came around, they said, well, we're not going to use those people. We're going to use another crew of people, right? And they went to Ryan Hagan, the original creator of Vampire, and they went to other people. And the Onyx Path people have been attacking it on, the new edition on social justice grounds ever since, because they wanted to own the game, right? And even though they had run it to the ground, they were expecting that when the 5th edition was going to come out, they were going to get them to do it, and they were going to just try to repeat all the same mistakes they did before, right? And so they ended up getting ousted in favor of people that were much more competent than they were. And so their response was to call it a Nazi game, right? And to go after that.
Yeah, I mean, Mark's a good guy. He's living in Georgia now, in Eastern Europe. So he kind of knows that area. I would have thought he would have picked up on it if he thought it was that problematic. I haven't seen how much of a discussion he's had about it, but he's a lot like me, I think, except he's in a kind of earlier stage of being shocked at all of this.
Right. Well, he was kind of semi-retired for a long time, and he might not have realized the bad things in the game.
Yeah, and I think he would want to reflect, the bad things that are going on in that area, because it helps raise awareness. And it's just the way they always did things before, sometimes really well, sometimes not. I mean, there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with a game having a social agenda, or obviously being a lefty myself, I don't see a problem with having a game that is rooted in left-wing politics. The problem for me is when it becomes propaganda rather than just naturally, environmentally presenting a point of view. I mean, you can't avoid presenting your point of view in a lot of creative work anyway. Right. But it does seem to have tipped into this propagandizing. And when they don't propagandize, or don't propagandize in the right way, that seems to be when they get targeted.
Right. The propagandizing was the last problem, the previous problem. We have now evolved to the next stage, because now it's not enough for them to say, well, you must accept these games that we have that are basically just political propaganda disguised as a game that we're going to try to heavy-handedly force on you. Now they moved on to say, if you produce any game that doesn't have SJW political propaganda, we're going to label you a Nazi and demand that you be taken out of the hobby forever, right? So this is the next step, right? Where they can not just say, well, we're going to make our propaganda. They can attack a game for not having their propaganda, right?
How long do you guys think that this current wave is going to happen, or is going to continue on until there's some sort of reversal or balance or righting of the ship, or people just wake up and realize that the essence of role-playing isn't social justice taken to like 11? Do you think we're going to get to that point in the next couple of years, or I
think they're going to get increasingly crazy over the next 2 years, and then when Donald Trump gets reelected, they'll have a morale crash, and there'll be enough of a culture change that they're going to be done, I think. And then after that, we're going to see a shift in the culture. Also, not just that, but also as the next couple of years go by, you're getting more and more Gen Z people who despise millennial SJWism that are coming of age, so to speak, and will start having more and more of a voice and will be opposed to this sort of bullshit. So the combination of right now, the fact that they still think we have to defeat Donald Trump is one of the things that's really motivating them to become more and more extreme, because they keep thinking if we double down and become even more radical and more insane, then somehow that's going to translate to profit. We don't know how. It's the underpants gnome theory, but it's what they're doing. And then when they lose in 2 years' time, there's going to be a big crash in that, because there's going to be a bunch of people that then will finally say, well, okay, now we've got him another 4 years. That's just too much for us to bear. And there's going to be a bunch of young people that are going to be saying, this stuff that our millennial older siblings or young parents did is bullshit, right? And I think that's where it's going to change.
Well, even though I'm kind of coming around to the idea that, the orange man isn't necessarily bad all the time.
He's not. He's slowly transforming into a non-NPC. Look at that.
I'm still under the assumption that he's not going to win another election, but which doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could embolden the far left, getting someone else in. It depends on what happens. Who becomes president. But even for the sake of argument, Donald Trump does another 4 years. Is that going to push things even further? Well, I guess what I want to know is that kind of genre of role playing, is that going to split into this divide where it's like traditional OSR and like modern story game, and then there's like this whole other section, or is it kind of like going to go away the way of the Forge, where it seemed like a good idea at the time, I guess, but then everybody else 10 years later was just like, no, that was complete crap. But then a couple individuals will like succeed, like the apocalypse world thing, and stand on the shoulders of SJWs and eventually create something that is very popular in mainstream. I don't know.
I thought this was coming to an end several times before, and I've been wrong every single time. But we've now got this backlash coming in the opposite direction, which I don't think is good either. So rather than the pendulum swinging, I feel like I'm getting it from both sides. Now I've got one lot yapping in my ear calling me problematic, and the other lot yapping in my ear calling me a degenerate.
Well, if we look at this from the point of view of design, right? Because ultimately what's going to win the hobby is design. The SJWs have one great disadvantage, right? Any product they make has to have a political commissar supervising the design, right? They have to make a design of a game. Their games have to be political by definition. They have to have political messages in them at the very least, right? Whereas the other side, the free speech side, like my games aren't political. My games are just games, right? I can be political, but I can make products that are politically neutral, that are products about, medieval Europe or ancient India, to give a couple of examples, right? And they can't really do that because if they do an apolitical game, then they're going to be they're going to be accused of remaining neutral. So you end up, I think that ultimately the way that they're going to lose is that their political extremism demands totality, right? If you want to say I'm politically extreme, I don't think I am, but let's say you did. Mine, even if that was true, mine doesn't demand totality. It doesn't demand that everything I do in my life has to be about my political wokeness, right? I can talk about politics, and then I can do stuff that has nothing to do with politics. And most OSR gamers and most gamers in general don't really want games to be about politics, right? They don't. They want the games to be about playing games. And so you can have games that are political that will appeal to some people, but if you want to appeal to the majority of gamers, you have to make games that are politically neutral. And I think they're not only can they not really do that now, they're becoming increasingly incapable of doing that because of the increasing level of purity demands that their group is making. They're becoming more totalitarian, not less.
And they see everything that you do in a political light, even when that's not what you're aiming for, even when you're not making a political game. Like they'll look at Albion, for example, and they'll say that you're extolling the virtues of medieval Christianity and traditional hierarchies and so on, because they're incapable of seeing it primarily as a game and a context in which you're playing a game.
You
Right,
son
but
of a bitch.
that makes them look like idiots, right? So that this is also working against them, right?
How can you not be a Nazi if you are playing a medieval role-playing game?
Because it's the same thing with their own with their treatment of D&D. To them, every orc in D&D is a black man, right? And every player character is a white oppressor. You know, so like when you have that kind of mentality, when you're so twisted into that way of looking at things, you can't help but self-destruct.
Just because my paladin has a swastika on the hilt of a sword, that doesn't necessarily mean that.
It's called fucking role playing. Yeah, it's the whole point. Often is to experiment with and encounter things that you can't in your life. To play people who aren't you. To explore worlds that aren't the real world, or maybe are the real world, but in history or the future or whatever. This is the whole point. This is the very essence of role playing, and it seems to have whooshed past.
And instead, they want to make role-playing tiny. They want every setting, they're demanding that every setting has to be Seattle in 2018 during a gay pride parade, and that every adventure has to be about fighting Donald Trump. So like, if that's what their aim is, you know, then they're coming in with such a huge disadvantage that I don't think that they're going to be able to win anything. You know, they're going to be able to keep complaining online. They're going to be able to keep trying to censor products. And like I said, because in the bigger picture of Western politics, they're going to keep having, I think, a growing intensity, even as their influence might diminish slightly over the next 2 years. They're going to be able to keep being a nuisance of themselves. But then after that, they're going to start losing more and more. You know, it's going to go away. And this is sort of stuff repeat itself. I mean, political correctness was largely in the 80s, was largely a reaction, a hysterical reaction to the Reagan government. And the increasing influence of political correctness disappeared after Dukakis lost the election. The Democrats started to change and said, well, hang on, we've done the same thing several times now and we've lost. And then they brought in a guy like Bill Clinton, who was the antithesis of political correctness, right? He was a guy who knew how to win, right? And at the same time as Clinton was elected, you saw basically the death of the old PC movement, right? It survived only in the universities where it won all the tenured seats, and then started to spread its poison again slowly over the next 20 years. But this same cycle is going to repeat itself, right? They're going to lose again in 2020. And they're probably going to lose again in 2024, and then and eventually, even the people on the left will start to isolate these lunatics because they realize that every time they double down, they just lose worse. You know.
So, Pundit, how excited are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that Hillary is planning to run again in 2020?
Oh, 11, my dude, 11. Like, this is the best thing that could have happened to us, right? Like, it's just amazing. I want to see if she still has the internal power to rig the Democratic primary, because if she does that, then you're going to see this like three-way civil war in the Democratic Party between the establishment hacks, like, you know, she'll be the Jeb Bush of the establishment Democrats, versus the ultra left wing of the Democratic Party, versus this kind of I think there'll be some kind of an emergent, probably populist, moderate Democrat movement that will be saying we have to, you know, a pox on both of these houses, right? But it means that they'll be in a complete disarray. If Hillary runs, the Democrats are just going to be a gigantic mess.
Even if I had heard that news a year ago, back before my transformation to the dark side complete, I would have been like, no, that's a terrible idea. Why would you do that? Why would Hillary ever decide, oh my God, to run again, knowing how just deeply unpopular she was? You know, it's not her fault necessarily. It's just many people didn't like her. And
it's the next best thing to having a time machine and going back and assassinating Orange Hitler.
Yeah. For Hillary, it's always been about her own personal power and ego. And for a lot of people, it was about this idea that Hillary should have been crowned, and so they're going to like that Hillary is running again, because again, it's just like Grim said, it's like their idea of like the rematch, so that this time things will go right, except it won't. It'll go much worse. Right?
I don't think she's going to win the primary. I think she's going to only get so far, and then people are going to be like, "Yeah, nope, get to the back of the bus, bitch." And someone, I hope, like Joe Biden, is going to run, like a true moderate Democrat who's got some charisma and is kind of more old school and not.
I mean, Joe Biden is not nearly as bad as some of the people that could run, but like, you are familiar with Joe Biden and his works, right? And you are also familiar with Donald Trump, and you saw what Donald Trump did to Jeb Bush in the Republican primaries. Can you imagine what he's going to do to Joe Biden? Like, just how.
I hope
like,
Joe
Biden
going
to be helpless. Oh my God.
Off. I think there's a chance
they'll be forewarned this time.
That's why he's great.
We do have one. We do have one other news item.
Let's get back to role-playing games.
Well, hang on. I want to interject one little
Politics
thing.
is the great game.
Yes. Okay. Since it is my birthday, I'm 44 today. Yay!
Yay.
I was, because of the whole shitstorm, as we talked about earlier in the show, I knew a lot of people were talking about me, and so I just Googled like Venger Satanis, OSR, and wanted to see what a lot of people were saying that I hadn't seen, like on their own blog posts or whatever. And I actually didn't find as much as I thought, but I did find a couple of reviews that I hadn't seen before. One actually was pretty recent. It was like a week ago. And so this is just a tidbit. This is a paragraph from the islands of purple haunted putrescence. So I want to read this in honor of myself. Okay. And this is from, I think, Prince of Nothing or Age of Dusk or something like that, some blog like that. Anyway, okay. The encounters are a colorful mess of references from different genres, mostly sci-fi and fantasy. In a hex, you might encounter anything from murderous clowns, a 70s porn star about to be sacrificed by a cult of great old one worshippers, mutant bikers, Migo, corroded futuristic machinery, dinosaurs, robots to sorcerers. This thing is the sequel to Carcosa with the brakes filed off. Shot in a dingy backroom studio against a green screen while the director is constantly yelling instructions at a mannequin camera crew that isn't even running while he does meth off an aging hooker's butt crack.
Well, man, let me say this. Carcosa was pretty much, from my point of view, was pretty much a piece of crap. And Purple Haunted Putrescence was a masterpiece. It was way better than Carcosa. And
Thank you very
I've
much.
always said, it's the only real OSR product you ever made. It's also the best book. It's also the best book you've ever made. And I think that,
yeah,
when you finally get tired of doing, the 15th last Alpha Blue supplement, I think you should do a new expanded version of the Island of Purple Haunted Putrescence. A more complete compendium. Make it like
I'm gonna put
a 300
to bed, so to speak, for temporarily at least. That I don't want to focus that on 2019. 2019, I want to focus on stuff like the islands, Gonzo, science fantasy, somewhere straddling between OSR and 5th edition. So find that sweet spot. That's gonna be my 2019 goal. To focus on that, to leave Alpha Blue kind of, it had its awesome run, and I did it to death. I loved it, and I'm proud of it. But I need to take at least a year break from that, and go back kind of the roots, more of a D&D. Mad Max meets Dark Sun meets the Purple Islands,
Well, look,
all the 70s and 80s pop cultural science fiction and fantasy and horror that I love, exploitation.
Do an expanded product, 300 to 400 pages, dual-statted OSR and 5th edition of the World of the Purple Haunted Progressor, or something like that. That would be wonderful.
Or the purple-headed tumescence, perhaps.
Well, I always got to look forward. I mean, part of me is like, yeah, I could go back and I could like fix some of the things from Liberation of the Demon Slayer or the Purple Islands that didn't quite connect, or some of the optional rules which may have been kind of wonky, or there's little tweaks I could do, or I could expand things. But at the end of the day, I just kind of want to move forward, and who knows? Maybe the 10-year anniversary, I'll like go back and I'll redo some stuff.
Well, before we got distracted,
yes,
Venger, we were going to drop our last topic, which is that apparently, somehow I've missed this news, the RPGNOW storefront is being shuttered and folded in to Drive-Thru RPG.
Yep.
Do I have that correct? Okay,
yes,
so
yeah.
What's the thing with that is RPGNOW was, well, they used to be separate companies. RPGNOW was always more focused on indie products like ours, so this is a bit of a concern. While Drive-Thru was always more focused on the kind of back catalogue of the, I hesitate to use the word large companies when it comes to the RPG industry, but larger companies. So if RPGNOW is going away, I guess our concern would be that our products aren't going to get the exposure and so on that they otherwise used to.
I don't think so.
And PDF is such a huge part of the indie RPG scene now. It's potentially impactful.
I mean, I'm not even a small company, really, in the grand scheme of things. And I'm so, tiny in comparison that I probably don't even register. However, for one reason or another, maybe just because I like the color scheme or it just seems slicker or something, or I like the name better, I've always focused on Drive-Thru RPG rather than RPGNOW. And I've done extraordinarily well with the non-adult titles because you kind of hamstrung with the stuff that has to be behind the adult filter, because those don't show up in just general like categories on the main page. Those are like behind the wall. And even if you have opted in to see that kind of stuff, you don't see it on the main page. You kind of have to go look for it or find a link. But anyway, there's stuff like adventure writing like a fucking boss or the game mastering book, things that are more neutral, that aren't exploitation or aren't too racy or sexual or whatever. I've been on the bestseller lists in some of those categories, like in the top 10 of under $5, for weeks sometimes. So I think it's kind of a level playing field pretty much. And I don't think it's going to do anything to squeeze the OSR out. If anything, it might coalesce it or build it up, get more eyes on that sort of thing. But that's just me. And also, I think I got to go because.
All right.
Okay.
That's why we let you talk first. Happy birthday, and we'll see you later.
Thank you. Yes. Good night, guys.
Take care.
Good night.
So what you were saying was right, Grim, that once upon a time, there were two different companies that were these delivery companies for RPGs. RPGNOW, I believe, was the first one. And then when PDFs became more and more important, that's when Drive-Thru RPG came out. Drive-Thru RPG was always a vehicle for the bigger name publishers to do their stuff. Whereas RPGNOW, when it originally started, I think a lot of their product base was kind of the indie story games, and then the nascent OSR and small press publishers, and it always focused on small press publishers, which is probably why it was.
And also the few RPG designers who had name recognition would do like off-book projects on RPGNOW as well.
They did their own self-publishing. You're right. And there was probably because of that they got eaten by Drive-Thru-RPG. And then we saw for many years, I don't remember exactly how long ago this was, but I'm pretty sure that it was, it was at least 8 years ago, I think, something like that, that you've had both companies owned by the same big umbrella company, which is One Bookshelf. But they kept up the kind of the illusion that they were two different sites with two different, with kind of two different styles. And this had its good sides and its bad sides, right? It meant that you could focus, if you were a small press publisher, you could focus your product on RPGNOW, where it might draw more attention because it wasn't where you'd see all the big, the big name products swamping it. On the other hand, it meant that, for example, sales were tracked separately. So the rankings could be different depending on whether your book sold more on one site or on the other. Apparently now they're going to integrate all the rankings, all the sales together, which might mean that some books might actually jump up in ranking because of that. Others might not. But I think one of the biggest problems from my point of view that happened with having these two sites is that it still maintained kind of at least the vaguest illusion that there were two different places that if you were a small press publisher, you could publish products. And there wasn't. There was just one company. And somebody asked here if there has been in the notes here, someone said in our chat, someone said, has there been any move on Drive-Thru-RPG to purge themselves of problematic content? Well, there was a movement a few years ago that tried to demand the kind of the mass censorship of problematic content from there. Of course, the SJWs were behind it. And they were putting a lot of pressure on One Bookshelf to do this. And then a few of us, including James Raggy and myself, did a lot of lobbying and pushing back to make it clear to One Bookshelf that they had more to lose by doing this than by not doing this, right? And so that kind of put the stop on it, and it changed a plan that would have allowed basically anyone who claimed to find any book offensive to be able to ban it, to this system where a complaint would cause an examination, and then a product would either be banned, which has only happened I think once or twice, or they would be whitelisted, and then you couldn't make another offensive complaint against it.
Well, there was my Gamergate card game got banned. Right. There was Tournament of Rapists, which is by the Black Tokyo guys. I think they may have had some other products pulled or delisted as well. I'm not 100% on that though. Venger had a book pulled until he changed it because there was, I think, one mention of rape at some point in the book. That was it. That seems to be the sticking point.
Right. But anyways, it became, as a tool, it was not something that the SJWs ended up being really able to use, to the point that I think that if there are people sympathetic to the SJWs on OBS, they may have gone on to doing other tactics. I have no way to actually prove it, but my Lion and Dragon book was in the top 5 of the bestsellers on RPGNOW for like a month and a half, and it was staying strong. And then suddenly a mix-up caused them to lose that that entry for my game, and had to bring up a new one from zero, which threw me off the top 10 list, and I never managed to get back, right? So it was something that literally cost me money. But this all highlights the danger of the fact that there is only one real fulfillment site for small press RPGs. And maybe now when we're going to see that there's only Drive-Thru-RPG, people will kind of get that more seriously, and that the fact that this is a very dangerous situation to be in, because SJWs are not going to stop trying to put pressure, and it could lead to a situation where any book that they don't like could end up being censored. So I still think that there's an unhealthiness in there not being competition in this. I'm still desperately hoping that somebody is going to decide to make the effort to create a new, version of RPGNOW, a fulfillment house focused on, the medium and small press titles, that will also hopefully there'll be free speech, but even if they're not, the fact that then there would be a competitor site you could go to, this would create a situation where it would be more challenging to any one website to do censorship, because they'd be afraid if they censored the product and the other site didn't, that they'd be losing money to that other site.
Yeah, there was Your Games Now for a while, which really tried to compete. Spent a lot of money on advertising at Gen Con and so on, but and we're trying to give publishers a greater share of the profits. But that ended up being wound up. There's E23, but Steve Jackson Games is very conservative, so that's not a particularly good place if you want to go for full free-for-all free expression. But they're coming at it from the right-hand side of the political spectrum. Steve's always been fairly conservative. That's nothing new. It's not a surprise to anybody. Paizo have an online store, but they've removed some of my products from that, and I've stopped uploading to theirs because it's not worth the time and effort. Same with E23. So there are other sites, but they're just not of a size where it's competing at all. It needs someone professional, really, to come in and do it.
Yeah, really. So yeah, but I mean, it's true. Somebody just said on the chat, we need to take a page from Comicsgate and start thinking about free speech advocates making their own distribution platform. I think that this has to happen, and the problem is, of course, that you've got this whole machine that's going against you. That we've seen stuff like sites that try to set up as competitors to Twitter, getting this cabal, this I don't know how you call it, this racket of the major Silicon Valley sites all working against them at once, right? So PayPal will refuse them service, and then GoDaddy will remove their registry, and all of this stuff based on nonsensical excuses, right? They did this to Gab.
Well, I'm in the process of setting up my own sales point because I've gotten so sick of all this. There's like one bank account that will allow me to sell adult product. So there's that, and then I've got to get them to interface with a separate payment processor, and then they've got to interface with the sales point website. And the fact that I want it to be basically, if it's legal, I can have it up there. Just that. There's so many hoops to jump through, and it's just me. I don't want to spend all my time that I could be creating something, fiddling about with a website or dealing with accounts or something. So it's not something that just one or two people can do. It needs a team.
Yes, yeah, and a team of people who know how to do it, right? Which is why it hasn't happened yet. But yeah, I'm still hoping that at some point someone will decide to get on it. I guess some very successful, computer guy, or just some random millionaire who loves RPGs and has a free speech mentality and will try to do this. Not so much like the ideal would be that a Mycenas sort of guy who will do it on a lark and will provide an alternative.
I think Drive-Thru came out from some of the remnants of White Wolf, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Steve Week and his brother. Yeah, so maybe a middle tier company. Yeah, maybe a middle tier company like Modifius or Cubicle 7 or someone will do it. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, this is the same problem we're facing everywhere. Is that there's this choke point when it comes to money, and then there's these single companies, if de facto monopolies like Twitter, like YouTube, like Facebook, like Amazon, that just dominate. And if they change the rules on you, you've basically got nothing you can do.
Yeah, well, they're like 19th century oil barons or something. There's I think that we really need to redesign antitrust laws for the 21st century, because this is not, I know that some other libertarians say, oh, well, hang on, a company's got a right to do this or that, right? But monopolies and trusts and rackets are not a part of classical capitalism, right? It's a problem in classical capitalism. It's something that Adam Smith addressed. It's not something that we should be afraid of confronting. And it's very clear that what we have here is a public square that has been privatized basically by accident because it just became the public square. And that now a small number of companies have taken over a vast amount of that public space that is the internet. And you have to take measures to stop those companies from fighting from trying to shut down their own competitors, right? And we've seen this in the gaming industry itself, where you have like some of the leaders trying to attack products, be it White Wolf or other products in the past, are other gaming companies that obviously stand to profit from those other games not succeeding, right? So it comes
Paizo
down to
Paizo and Evil Hat.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been it's been quite funny actually watching all this unfurl with reference to social media, and in the RPG industry as well. But suddenly I've got all these libertarians who I normally fence and argue with quite a bit are suddenly fans of government intervention to make sure that our personal rights are guaranteed in these privately owned spaces. And meanwhile, the people on the left, the more would-be socialists, are saying, "Oh no, a company should be able to censor whatever it likes." It's just this complete role reversal.
Well,
it's funny.
It's an argument of convenience for the left. For the right, the thing is that you've got two very different kinds of libertarians, right? And I'm not talking about like Marxist libertarians, something like that. I'm talking about real libertarians, where you have the ones that are kind of like the objectivist style that think that you shouldn't have government doing anything, and then you have the kind of the libertarians that are the kind of constitutionalist, liberty-based, cultural libertarians that think that you need to have a very small government, and the role of government needs to be to protect, to defend the free market, which includes fighting monopolies and preventing things like trusts, and to defend individual freedoms, right? And that those are legitimate roles of government. But for the left, I mean, it's just like, I like I said, I used to identify as being someone who was on the left for most of my adult life until, really the last 5 years. And the left, anytime up until 2016, if you talked about the CIA to the left, the CIA was the devil, right? I mean, like the CIA are the guys that overthrew all kinds of democratic governments in South America and elsewhere in the world, right? They're the dictatorship makers. They're the ones that do all the dirty tricks. The FBI as well, the enemies lists and spying on civil rights figures and all of that. And now all of a sudden they're the great fans of the deep state and are actively hoping for the CIA and the FBI to do a secret coup against the Orange Man, right? So it's like it's just ridiculous, right? The way that this is turned.
Yeah,
my principles haven't changed. The definition of my principles make me have changed.
Yeah.
We should probably wrap up. You got anything you want to shell or anything?
Well, I'll first of all, I'll say again to everybody watching now or watching this in the future, if you want us to make more frequent videos, then support us on Patreon. The Patreon is going to be I'm assuming it's going to be linked in the description. And, if we get more funding, then we'll be obliged to make more episodes a month, which we would love to do. Mainly, we have to make sure Venger's wife allows us to. And besides that, well, check out, obviously, my RPG Pundit Presents series, which is a weekly PDF supplement available on DriveThruRPG or RPGNOW, as well as the Presses Intermedia web store, where I'm doing products every week that they're all OSR products, and they're either focused on Gonzo gaming or medieval authentic gaming. You could also use them in, D&D 5th edition or whatever else with very little conversion. I guess that's it for me.
Cool. I've only got one thing I want to show today. Every year I do a fundraiser to provide art scholarships for genre artists, whether they're in school, college, university, or whether they're just down on their luck in reduced circumstances or whatever. And I do this in memory of an artist I used to work with who was rather tragically killed. So I wanted to do something to commemorate him. So if you go over to postmortemstudios.wordpress.com, that's my main sort of hub at the moment of all my activity. You'll see it there. It's got the Zelart Scholarship or Dark Zel Scholarship. I've swapped the name back and forth a couple of times. So we're currently doing an Indiegogo fundraiser to raise a lump sum to basically help a young or underprivileged genre artist out. And what we do is they send me some art. It's open entry to anyone who meets those criteria, and someone gets a lump sum, usually around $600 to $700. The artwork that they send in that wins goes on sale to help fund the process the next year around. So you can help by donating money. If you are an artist and you've got some spare bits, you can donate those, and then I can sell them as stock art, and that helps raise money for it next year. So that's running at the moment, and I'd appreciate any donations. Or if you know artists who meet those criteria, tell them. If you are one, then enter. But go and check it out on my website.
Sounds like a really noble cause.
It's good. It is fulfilling, and it's a good way to commemorate someone, because I helped pay his way through school by giving him work, and so doing that again for other people just feels like the right way to commemorate someone, I think.
That's great, man. All right.
Cool. Well, we should say good night, everyone, and I should get some sleep. It being nearly 3 a.m.
Ali Hawkbill with Image Virginia. What's
your cat's name again?
This one? Her name's in Spanish, but it translates to meatball.
It's very cute.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Every time it's on my YouTube channel, it gets me more views.
Wow, there you go.
I never put her there. She just kind of jumps in. She likes to be in front of the camera. My other cat is shy.
Good night, everyone. See you next time.
Take care, guys.